Welcome to today's webinar entitled Unified Security Approach for Education. My name is Billy Zadig, Manager of Special Programs for APA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to APA's webpage under the Continuous Learning tab later today. Professional continuing education credits, including AIA certificates, are being offered for today's program. Those who indicated they wanted a certificate at registration and meet requirements will receive certificates later this afternoon. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your questions in the chat box and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by our presenter. If you're just calling in, make sure you send me an email at Billie, B-I-L-L-I-E, @APA.org, so I can send you a certificate if you would like one. The system only recognizes you if you log in. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to David Stolorow, our speaker for today. David, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. So today we're going to be talking about a unified security approach from education. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce who I am. My name is Dave Stolorow. I'm a National Business Manager for Security, Enterprise, and Smart Buildings with Siemens. So what that means is I get involved with some of our complex projects, our integrated projects, which fits really well with our discussion today. I also sit on the Security Industry Association Board for Industrial Security, and I am an alternate committee member for NFPA 3000 ASHER program, Active Shooter Hostile Event Response Program. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. And with that, we'll get right into it. So the objectives for today, we're going to discuss what is a unified solution and how are the latest trends in the industry and the latest technologies that we see being deployed able to be implemented into your security solution for campus and educational security. We're going to understand the benefits of adopting a unified approach to your security plan. We're also going to talk about what does an ecosystem of integrations or disparate systems coming together in a unified approach look like, and how can you develop a roadmap to get there? And we're going to talk about best practices and approaches to how to get started to unify your systems at your schools and districts and campuses. So to begin any type of discussion around security, deployment of solutions, or a unified campus, we need to understand what the challenges are. And you know, the challenge is there's a sampling here, but really when we look at a place of learning, it's one where students, staff, and faculty should feel safe and secure so they can focus on the core mission, which is learning, right? Education. We are challenged with creating an environment to become a safe and secure place for education to occur. And creating this environment is becoming a bigger challenge and a bigger responsibility every day. What's interesting as we look at these challenges is they're not always aligned with the priorities that educators or people in charge are also challenged with developing. So when we look at some of the pressures a campus has and needs to address, we look at things like aging infrastructure, rising cost of maintenance and associated labor costs, accelerating technology and trying to keep up with that, rising tuition costs, and demanding sustainability goals are always a concern. We see competition for dollars at the highest level that we've ever seen them, including competition for research dollars. There's a need for fundraising unlike we've ever seen before. And we also see serious threats to safety, such as active shooter or hostile events, and those continue to be on the rise. Compliance and reporting requirements are always of concern. And then we look at things like the job market and how that's impacting our students and how students are picking what school they might want to go to as they focus on their future. Now, if we flip that conversation, we look at what's declining, we start to see things like state funding. Revenue is declining. Department funding is declining. Number of skilled staff and faculty as turnover rates increase. Alumni donations and flat enrollment growth is occurring. And we see the affordability for students becoming a significant challenge as well. Social, emotional, and behavioral concerns, according to the National Association of School Psychiatrists, they show that more students have experienced unprecedented levels of disruption and stressors. Under normal circumstances, we would expect approximately 20% of children to experience some social, emotional, or behavioral concern throughout their school career. We now expect these to double or even triple since COVID. And we separated out liability as a challenge. Why do we do that? So risk exposure is really identifying the school's responsibility and the liability that they hold if they don't perform, if they don't utilize the technologies available today. The responsibilities that personnel have for security have never been at the highest level of needing to understand what's the risk for your campus, what's the exposure you have today, and how do you harden your facilities and provide those protections to include areas that might not have been thought of or considered before. Those charged with protecting our schools need to be proactive and engage in proper resources. So those resources include school resources, could be funding opportunities, community and business partners and leaders should be considered, as well as consultants. City and community leaders such as police and FBI can be consulted as well. I can tell you from a personal experience, I support my children's school annually performing a risk assessment, looking at hardware as well as software and vulnerabilities around the school. And there's resources such as that, as well as reaching out to Siemens, where we can come out and help you understand what are the liabilities, what is the risk that you have, and what exposures are you setting yourself up to. So once we understand the challenges, from a design perspective, we can start looking at what are going to be the right technologies to impact these challenges or to mitigate the risk exposure that we have. So let's talk about what's changed with technology and what does a smart school look like as we start integrating these solutions. So the single most developed impact that we see from a technology increase is within cameras. When you look at the technology that's been developed around computer processing and the types of chipsets that are putting cameras today, we're seeing edge analytics, including AI-based analytics, deployed within cameras and available to customers in some cases at no additional charge. The camera manufacturers are putting firmware on the cameras today that are detecting situational threats unlike we've ever seen before. And in the past, those types of analytics would have been extremely costly from a hardware perspective, having to put in additional servers that requires additional infrastructure across your network, heating and cooling costs, real estate space in the data center, and technology understanding from your IT department to manage those analytics were very costly. Because we're seeing that developed on the edge today, we're seeing two parts. We're seeing a utilization that provides a level of efficiency never seen before. And we're also seeing costs drastically reduced because the analytics that are developed for the edge or being run on the camera themselves, we don't have to deploy all these additional servers. The cameras themselves, as they're connected into your video management system, are bringing through in a transparent way those analytics. So there's no additional integration considerations or custom programming needed at your head end or your security operations center to run these new analytics. Things like AI will detect people, vehicles, right? What is the camera seeing? And as the camera becomes more intelligent and understands what's in the scene, those alarms and events that are coming across the operator are that much more actionable. We see false alarms reduced, even things as simply as recording on motion. We don't have to spend time blocking out clouds or sun or leaves and rain because we see motion. The cameras are now intelligent enough to understand that's not something we're ever going to be concerned with, leaves blowing in the wind. As we look at other technology that's come across, weapons detection, shooter detection systems have become very advanced, but have also developed solutions that are easily integrated into your video management and access control platforms. And we're going to talk about that today so you understand what that looks like in a unified solution when an active shooter event were to happen. But we're seeing other things. Predictive analytics are changing the way we approach service contracts, maintenance contracts. How do we keep a system up and running? And that's been a costly challenge for campuses in the past as they look at deploying more and more cameras and access control across campus. It's how do I maintain those systems to be functional? And we've historically been extremely reactive. When something breaks, we're running out trucks, we're rolling out, sending out technicians. They have to do some investigations to figure out what's happened. And predictive analytics today are allowing us to perform preventative maintenance tasks that are over 55% more effective in keeping systems running. And we're seeing a significant reduction in those breaks and calls to come out and fix something that has been broken. We're unfortunately, through the war efforts that's occurring in Ukraine, we're seeing drones being utilized as weapons today. In the past, the critical infrastructure areas throughout the country, oil and gas, detention centers, were the main areas that we saw drones as a threat. And through the use of YouTube and other social media applications, people are learning how to turn drones into weapons of warfare. And we're seeing that as a significant threat and a concern in our industry. It's being talked about recently at ISC West. There were several sessions where we talked about the implementation and implications of drones as a security threat to our facilities, especially campus type environments. So we're looking at now looking up for the first time ever as we develop a solution in protecting our space. It's not just a perimeter that would be a fence line, right? We now have a vertical area that we need to consider protecting our perimeters. And then we look at items like smart lockers, we'll talk about in a moment here, IoT devices, and other sensors that start bringing a level of comfort to users of the facility, users of your campus, whether that be staff or students. We're seeing a demand for intelligence to be expected as we're moving throughout a facility. A people-centric space is what people are looking for, and we're seeing that directly related to what we have at home, right? So many of us have a connected home today where we can talk to an Amazon Echo device and tell Siri, tell Alexa to play music, turn on our lights, set an alarm, tell me when my shipment is coming. And people are taking that experience that's become normal and commonplace in the home into the workplace. And they're expecting to see that as they interact with the workspace. We've seen that over the years with the intelligence that's been brought into visual aids in the classroom, smart TVs, smart screens. You know, it's long past as the days of projectors where we're putting paper on a screen, right? Same thing with physical security, and we're seeing that across a lot of IoT devices. And then the other thing is audible sensors. For so long in our industry, we've turned off microphones. It's been a very challenged topic, whether or not we can record voice or speech or conversations. Is it a two-party state? Is it a one-party state? So regulations and rules and laws change. It's even changed within states. And what we're seeing today with analytics is we can analyze data without having to record or even understand the actual words or individual words that are being said. And what that now allows for us is to detect a scream or to detect a raise and increased dB level. Maybe it's a gunshot. Something is occurring that causes a fight, and kids are surrounding the two that are fighting, chanting, fight, 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 right? Audible microphones that are already deployed in most cameras today can detect that and send alarms to our communication center and operations center for immediate response. So we're seeing that type of analytics really affect how we respond to events and event management in whole. So trends, I talked about the customer experience. And as we look at how we're utilizing smartphones today or smartwatches, people are expecting that to move from their home into the workspace, as just talked about. What we're also seeing is an interesting conversation come out of the other building systems. So security as a whole has been IP or a digital solution for years. We migrated from analog a decade ago, right? And even longer. As we're seeing lighting within buildings, energy performance being managed from a digital solution or service, automation, fire becoming digital, even smart sprinklers are available today. We're looking at seeing those other industries or those other verticals within the industry start to understand data and integrations differently than we've ever seen before. And when you look at the real estate industry, talking about our buildings, they look at security and have identified that the key role security is going to play in this prop tech or real estate property technology is that we can identify where people are. Security systems know where people are. We have cameras, we have access control, and we're tracking that movement throughout a building, or we can be very easily. If we know that data, we can then apply that to all of those other systems to create that people-centric space. So we're starting to really see a demand for that. As a company, Siemens has developed a complete roadmap around all of our software applications to develop a unified platform that allows for all of this data to be actionable and automatic, right? That's important too, because as we look at the challenges around managing this data, we have to provide solutions that allow for some automation there. So how do we take trends and technology that we've looked at as being new and develop a secure campus, right? Well, it starts with defining your objectives. Any security consultant or engineer is always going to start with what's the intent? What are we trying to accomplish here? Understanding the challenges, understanding the risks involved, we're then going to have to look at how are you operating your security solutions? What does your staffing plan look like? Where do your cameras feed in, right? Are you managing it very actively, or is it after the fact where you're coming in purely from a forensic perspective? And from there, we start then to lay out hardening the perimeter. I mentioned looking up as much as fence line, right? But the challenge campuses have here is typically most college campuses are open. It's a very open platform. And the reoccurring discussion that I'm hearing is colleges having a challenge and a task really, and trying to figure out what's the best way and approach to close down this open campus. You know, putting access control in all of the buildings, not having open doors, restricting who comes in and out and flows, but then also understanding there's alumni and there's community that needs to be able to access these buildings as well. So how do you manage visitors, right? How do you manage people and the flow of that traffic without becoming too hardened? It's a very challenging medium to get to. So as we look at providing access control in and out of the buildings, we then move into an intelligent analytical camera that can record the events and monitor not only locally, but perhaps at the district level, or maybe a remote command center. The next step is to integrate these systems. And this is where most campuses and most educational facilities, even K through 12 schools are sitting today, is they've done a pretty good job of hardening the buildings from an access control perspective. We've done a really good job as a country putting cameras where they need to be, where we know that we're going to want insights and situational awareness, whether it's during an event happening or for that forensic purpose. But bringing those systems together to create a better situational awareness and being able to respond to those alarms very quickly is the challenge that most people sit at today. So 5 is where I would say most people on the call today are listening from and sitting in their position is, you know, what does it look like when we have that integrated solution? Now, there's people in the space, right? We have bystanders, we have the users of the building, staff and students that we need to communicate with when an emergency happens. You know, if there's a weather event, how are you getting that information out, whether someone needs to seek shelter or avoid, you know, a building that might be on fire? Having an effective mass communication system in place for notifying students and the community is important, and we put that as item number 6. And then 7, service and maintenance. Understanding, you know, how do we maintain these systems? The investment that's put in, not only from a financial, but from a perspective of trying to really go back to that core mission of education, is so critical to keep these systems running. And we, you know, look at predictive analytics and other solutions today that can bring some intelligence into how are we keeping solutions running. So This is kind of a guideline, right? It's an initial thought, but it's something that you can take away from this call and look at, you know, trying to segment and really separate and identify and put some cohesiveness around how do I approach a design process. Now, when we look at what we have today, I said most customers are looking at step number 5. They've been chasing these challenges. Usually, unfortunately, after an event occurs on campus, they'll look at adding more systems, right? It might be a weapons detection solution, and it could be more cameras. And what we see is a lot of disparate systems coming into a command center. We have multiple operators who have multiple software platforms they need to know and understand. Sometimes it's a separate mouse and separate keyboard. So if a door is forced, in the most simplest of example, does your operator have to minimize that alarm on their door forced or access control system and open up the cameras to then find where that door is and view what's happening? That's how a lot of operation centers are looking today. And what I challenge you and suggest is, through unification, you can change your entire model of how you're responding to these events. We can develop, we have developed software that allows you to take all of these systems and unify them into maybe not a single pane of glass, but into a single unified software platform that allows you to use your multiple monitors in your command center in a much different way than you had in the past. So in the example we see here, we can understand what the incident is and what resources, how do we manage our resources? Our police, our officers, our school resource officers, how are we deploying them? Is it based on any type of intelligence of understanding where they are in a building when an event happens versus getting on a radio and just blasting out to everybody, including people who might be on vacation or out to lunch? The situational awareness through mapping allows us to have a floor plan or blueprint of our building and holistically see every single system and all of the devices that are on there, whether it's lighting or it's a door lock, right? And that allows us then to have an interactive operation center with the building itself. And we're going to talk in a minute about an example and a use case and what it could look like with a unified solution with an active shooter. And then, of course, on the right, what we're showing is cameras, right? Visual verification, situational awareness, what's happening. But this is, when I say transform your operations center, rather than having dozens of cameras showing on monitors that are just showing all day long and no one's really watching, we're suggesting have this be a blink monitor. It's a spot monitor, it's an alarm monitor, and this is going to activate and show video when an event happens. So we're really changing our response to events and how we manage alarms from the operations center to specifically only look at alarms. You know, we don't care necessarily about the flow of traffic when the bell schedule is open at a K-12 building and everyone's coming in for the morning, right? We may want to look at a camera or two, but for the most part, we know everyone's coming in, the door's held open for 10, 15 minutes while that occurs. But if someone pushes through that back door and sends alarms, that's where we want our operators focusing on, where those alarms are coming in. So let's talk about that use case. When we look at this example, we have a total room automation platform installed. So this is utilizing motion detection, typically to affect temperature control in rooms, right? Could be lighting, could open up blinds, but the idea with the total room automation historically has not really been a security focus. It's been more of an automation and energy performance and savings, right? Some of those other challenges that take priorities. But when we understand that, hey, this is just information, and our security solutions can take the information, such as occupancy, it changes how our operators can view this. So you'll see that in a moment here as we go into the example of the active shooter. We also have access control and video in this facility. Our campus has a mass notification system, multiple monitors, PA systems, speakers through the fire system, digital signage, apps that allow texting and communication across the phones, have all been organized into a single unified mass notification for this customer. And that mass notification system has then been integrated further into a unified security platform. And then shooter detection systems, Guardian is the software that they have. That was deployed by this customer, and we'll talk through what that looks like and how that's deployed. What's interesting to note with the shot detection system, historically, it integrates with the video management platform. When a gunshot system detects an alarm or an event happening and a gun is shot, that alarm comes into the operator in a format that shows every single sensor that's picking up, highlights it on a map, right? A graphical representation of a floor plan to show the direction of travel. And then the integration to VMS allows for that video to pop up. From the operator perspective, I can send the alarm. I can call 911. I can tell police what's happening. There's an active shooter event. There's a hostile event. I need help now. I can tell my police on campus or my school resource officers, this is what the person looks like. They're in this hallway. But then that's about it. The rest of the time, the officer can't do much other than watch as things unfold, right? As the first responders get there and try to take out the shooter or stop the chaos, right? But that operator behind the monitor and with the mouse on the hand, other than being able to share some of the situational awareness they're seeing on cameras, has very little role physically with the building or with the event that's happening. And that's what I'm suggesting can change here with the unified system. So let's look at what happens. There's confusion, there's panic, not only in the operator space, right, but in the building and everybody who's in that building. There's significant delays in reporting. We found that even students will start recording, right? We've seen this time and time again where the phone calls will go to parents and loved ones. They're assuming that somebody else has called 911, right? So training becomes so important from the security and the police side of the house to be able to know what to do and take those right steps, because staff and students who haven't been trained to that level aren't going to know, and that's been a cause of some of these delays. The building occupants are asking the what, when, who questions, right? Where do I go? What do I do? Should I hide? Should I run? Was that a gunshot, right? There's a lot of chaos around it. And the operators need to be able to manage that. So what I want to show here is on the left, those are those alarms that are coming in from an active shooter from the Guardian system. You can see the report, automatic video has popped up, right? And we can start to see on a map with a single click what's happening and where that person is going as they continue to shoot. Now, what we're looking at here with a single click to dive down deeper into where those alarms are, the red dot on the top left of the screen is indicating the last known spot of the active shooter, right? Maybe I see them on camera and they're trying to get into those rooms. But now I have insights that I normally wouldn't without that unification. The green triangles tell me where occupants are in the building, coming out of the building automation system. But that information, now as an operator, I can start interacting with the building. I can lock all of these doors. I can darken the rooms where I know people are, where heat is censored or motion is censored, because we know that shooters will typically bypass that darkened locked room. I can notify people on this floor through the mass notification of the PA system a different message than what's being blasted out to the rest of the campus through the unification of a mass notification system. I can tell people on this floor that there's an active shooter last known on this floor. Run, hide, fight, whatever that message is going to be, to seek shelter and seek safety. Whereas other areas of campus, I'm going to say, avoid this building. There's been an active shooter and his known presence is here, right? So it provides that operator a completely different role and ability to interact with this type of event as it's happening, simply because we know where people are in a building. By unifying these systems together, right, and having a floor plan map that can show all of my devices on them, whether it's video or access, it allows me to very quickly and easily respond, saves time, and that's really where the as this slide says, the true automation happens, but really the integration and the power there is being able to see everything from a security solution at once. So again, that goes back to the beginning of this conversation where I said most campuses today that have installed all of these types of building systems have done so in response to a non-security threat, right? Or they haven't thought about how are we going to respond to these threats. So the challenge today is knowing we have all of these systems on site. How do we correlate that? How do we bring that into one unified platform, right? So let's talk about that and what that looks like. Here's another example of what that unification looks like within a video management platform, right? So there's multiple ways to do this. There's command and control platforms that can manage officers and resources, dispatching, right? GPS tracking of where our officers are, that can take a number of systems and solutions and tie it into one. And then at a smaller scale, might be more applicable for a K through 12 type application who doesn't have that command and control and doesn't have dozens of officers to dispatch and doesn't need a command and control operations center to that level. Even unifying video and access control, intrusion at a minimum, still allows for this type of interaction from a platform. You see your cameras, you have all of your locks, and anything that goes into alarm, whether it be a fire alarm or a door forced or a glass break in the middle of the night, this type of screen setup where you can see your maps, you can see your cameras, you can see the alarms coming in, still significantly reduce that effort to response, right? So let's talk about roadmaps a little. As we look at where Siemens is developing our solutions and understanding the challenges around unification, we put together a suite of software applications with the intention of unifying everything, right? So at the core of our platform is software, right? We're not a hardware manufacturer. We work with a number of third-party solutions, but from a software perspective, we're building an ecosystem of partnerships to a level where we understand there's a number of systems out there, a number of manufacturers and vendors out there that make a solution and do their job very well, such as the shooter detection system from Guardian. We don't want to reinvent that wheel. We don't want to start from scratch with trying to develop these multiple of systems where you saw those monitors on the screens a little bit ago. But what we do want to provide is a platform that all of these can be connected to, whether it's Siemens or it's not. So we have a number of roadmaps where we can look at how do we take disparate systems and bring them into our platform. Of course, there's benefits, right, to an all one manufacturer, right, from a licensing and integration, upgrades, cybersecurity perspective. But what I don't want to do is discourage you that if you don't have Siemens today, the consideration is not what it might have been 5 or more years ago. You don't have to rip out all of your systems, legacy systems, and replace them, right? There's in a lot of cases, we look at intelligent systems or intelligent buildings as a roadmap, and we look at what investments have been made today, what solutions do you have today, and how can we utilize those in creating this unified solution. Sometimes it's customization, right? And we have teams that can do that. But in other cases, it's simply a development kit, right? Or that kit might already exist, and we've already developed that. The point to get from this conversation is the conversation of openness and scalability is so important when we're talking about a digital world, right? And it goes so far beyond what we've done for a long time. Again, security has been digital and IP since we moved from analog over a dozen years ago. As the rest of the world starts to develop intelligent IoT devices, that's where we're looking at how do we bring everything together, because data can be actionable and can help keep buildings safe, right? And can make our efforts more effective. So with that, already partnered with a number of companies, right? These are the top manufacturers. This is not an all-inclusive list, but the understanding here is that Siemens as an integrator, we're looking at how do we provide this ecosystem similar to what you might think of with the Apple Store, right? Apple at the core of it works with all of those other apps that you can bring in, and we do the same thing. So from a hardware perspective, I said we don't manufacture anything. We bring in all of these partners because they do what they do so well. We want to communicate to their firmware and their software and other software manufacturers as well to provide that holistic ecosystem for security. So Billy, with that, I'm at the end of the presentation. I'd like to open it up for Q&A and see what questions might be out there, and how we can help everyone be more prepared when they're developing their roadmap to develop a unified solution.
I just sent a note out to everyone to say if they had a question for you to type it in the chat box. So we're waiting for some people to type in some questions. Basically, how does the NFPA active shooter standard work with this program that you've developed?
Yeah, so NFPA 3000 is, or NFPA in general, right, develops codes and standards of what needs to be done within a building to protect lives, right? That's, if I were to put a definition to it, that's how I would identify who NFPA is. The local jurisdiction, whether that's a city or a state, adopts versions of NFPA and puts that into their building code, right? So building code will reference NFPA and a specific version. I'll tell you, NFPA 3000 is still under development. It should be released in about a year with the next NFPA update. And we're hopeful that all of the jurisdictions globally adopt the latest version of NFPA and brings NFPA 3000 into it. That said, there's no requirements or code standards today around the level of what needs to be done. There's some, I would say there's some liabilities around guidelines, right? There's restrictions on how you can interact, understanding ADA and life safety, passive egress, right, comes into thought of mind with understanding access control and how that plays into a building with fire code. As security is looked at from an active shooter event, there hasn't been any governing body to date to stand up and say this needs to be addressed from an installation of physical security perspectives, and NFPA is taking that on. That being said, it's going to be a series of guidelines. It's going to be some of the guidelines, and I sit specifically on the technology perspective, where what that standard is saying is latest technology and hardware and software needs to be in consideration in the development and building of a structure. That access control, restricting access, having communications in place, having video cameras, having the ability for people to be able to protect themselves from this type of event has to be designed in the architectural considerations of the building itself, right? We've already seen this when we look at K through 12, for example. When my daughter first started going to school, she had forgotten her lunch one day on the bus, and I remember walking in the school, I hit the intercom button, they buzzed me in. I walked past the stairway that would have brought me to the upstairs area, down a hall, turned right 90 degrees, down another hall to get to the front office. And from there, I was able to give my lunch. But being in the security industry, I recognized immediately how unsecure that entryway is. There was no double set of doors. It was very easy for me to get to that second level of access. So sometimes it's not electronic, but the physicality of a building will come into play, and all of that will be identified in NFPA 3000 to talk to what does a structure have to, what standards does a structure have to be built to. Now, there's going to be grandfathered, right, areas, but the liability and the risk that we see is probably going to demand that the industry take proactive steps, that they don't wait until code dictates they have to do it now, even for those buildings that are grandfathered. The example I would give you is the tragedy at Uvalde. What came out of that was some spotlight that was put on the principal to question, did she do what she needed to make sure the access control system was up and functioning to the level it needed to be? Did she do what was required of the building to have a functional video system in place? Now, most of us on this call have probably seen the videos that came out and were published. The quality was excellent, right? If you look at just the functionality of the system, it was there. But people want to blame somebody, right? And that type of risk exposure, I think, is front of mind and scary, to be frank, for some principals and administrators at the educational facilities to say, am I going to be under a spotlight if some sort of chaotic event were to happen, right? Have I done everything I can do to be proactive? So NFPA 3000 is going to provide that guideline of what you could do, but it's also going to be extremely generic. It's going to be product agnostic. It's going to use things like you need to provide a way of protecting a space or closing a space off. And then you think to yourself, well, is that with locks? Is it access control? Do I need a door stopper, right? That type of specification isn't as detailed. And there's a lot of discussion right now as the code is being finalized and developed, and even rounds of open communication from the public space to answer or address, is this the way the language should be written? So I can tell you NFPA, after it's published, is going to continue to modify and monitor the language as technology continues to change. So hopefully that answered your question. I know that was a bit detailed, but it's kind of a lengthy topic.
It is. It really is. Our next question is, does Siemens provide an on-site campus assessment?
We do. So what I would tell you is our assessment is based on experience. We have a number of resources, including engineers, designers. We have national operations centers with solution developers that can come on site, as well as our sales force and our technicians located at our branches throughout the world. So we have a number of people that will utilize good engineering practices to review, safety, right? But the focus is on our offerings, and our offering is electronic security. When you think of physical security, an example I gave for your school, we wouldn't necessarily come in with a solution. How do we change that front door and where the stairway is located in the front office to provide a better entrance? But we could talk to and identify that's kind of a concern. There's also a number of consultants, engineer consultants that we could recommend. If you reach out to our local team, we have a lot of great relationships. In fact, this course being AIA certified, we provide a lot of AIA certified courses to engineering firms so that they understand what's possible with electronic security and how that fits in with the physicality of security. Your other resources, local police and FBI, I mentioned in the class. The FBI will go out to every single school and campus and do a holistic approach from a resource. And then there's Safer Schools. Karen, I know you're on the call today. The SAFE Act, it eludes me at the moment, the organization, but there's an organization that volunteers, and I know one of the founders is a consultant himself, but they've created a very detailed multi-page risk assessment that I know a lot of the Siemens personnel, myself included, will print and utilize. I've shared that with my school, so the school resource officer can go through and perform his own assessments, and it will drive down every single component of a building from perimeter within from assessment. So there are a lot of resources, yes, and Siemens will come on site to support that as well.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is there a lot of training that an operator would need to have to manipulate the system for dimming lights, changing notifications, etc.?
That's such a great point, and probably a part of the topic I could have talked to earlier. So when you look at unified solutions, the Siemens platform has built-in workflows, is what we call it. Workflows are going to pop up or generate preset operational procedures for every single type of event that could happen in your school. So we take the time and effort to understand what is your operational procedures, right? Every university and every K through 12 has a book that says if there's a tornado, this is what we do. If there's a hurricane, this is how we handle it. And if there's a fire, what are the steps that need to be done? Well, this will automatically pop up on the screens as well with actionable items. What needs to be done first, second, third, etc. Almost like a checkbox. So what's so nice about this is for the universities that are utilizing guard services and bringing in typically a high turnover position to be filled and augmented by outside resources, the training is actually very light because the system is going to tell them what to do. So operationally, it's much easier because they don't need to know the intrusion and video and access control and how to manage all of these resources. You'll have administrators certainly, and you'll have high power users that will know how to drive down into the scheduling functionality of your access control system. But at the event management perspective, your operators are simply being trained, how do I respond to events? And that really reduces how much they need to know about the software because they don't need to know now 20 applications. It's one application. And in the background, we've already set up that instruction guide for them.
Okay. Thank you. You mentioned earlier that the systems can now detect whether it's a leaf blowing or wind or just trees. But can the systems detect someone wearing a full-length top coat on a very hot day, all buttoned up?
So there's some third-party analytics. I would say that what's been developed and provided, as I said, for free, right, included on the camera, is not to that level, right? AI is certainly being developed and it will get there. But what we're seeing are third-party providers of analytics that usually from a more forensic perspective is saying, are they wearing a blue hoodie? Are they wearing a red jacket? Only show me those people with this shoe so I can track down everywhere they went and every single video that pops up. Now, the question is very specifically asked because we want to be proactive, right? We'd like to get an alarm before the event happens rather than trying to find out who was the perpetrator. Those types of analytics really look at anomalies and things that don't fit. I would say I personally have not seen the trench coat example work. Doesn't mean it's not developed. What I have seen developed is the shape and size of a gun setting off analytics. So if someone were to put it in their trench coat, that would set off the alarm as that pops up. People climbing through a window or breaking through a window, you might not have an intrusion system that has glass breaks, but if a video camera senses the motion of someone coming through that window, that would set off a trigger as not supposed to happen versus someone who might be walking outside on the sidewalk. The power there is you don't have to send a technician to sit behind the keyboard monitor and set up line crossing or rules-based analytics that says if somebody crosses this window, give me an alarm. The camera's intelligence is now starting to say, hey, that's an anomaly. Somebody doesn't usually come through the window. I need to action on this or cause an action, an alarm event. So I would say it's getting there, but I would caution everyone, and I'm a fan of proof of concept, right? Install analytics on 1 or 2 cameras if it's a third party. Every vendor is typically happy to give you a free trial and see how it works for you. So if someone does claim, hey, we'll detect that trench coat in summertime, have your officers walk around in a trench coat in front of those cameras and see what alarms are coming in from an analytic perspective or an AI. Again, I have specifically for that example, but the technology is advancing daily. We just left ISC West, and I would expect by GSX this fall, we'll see even more advancements released at that show.
Okay, well, thank you. Next question is, converting a campus can be a big job. Do you work with schools to develop the implementation plan?
We do. So we can help develop schedules, all the way as detailed as a Gantt chart, right? But typically what we do is we'll have a pretty rigorous design approach, right? Understanding what is it going to take, what are the steps, prioritize them and help put them in order. And then we can also put in the timing that it takes to do each step. So it's going to be based very specifically on your school. It's going to be based on what systems you have that you want to get integrated or have be integrated. And then at the same time, we're also going to look at what technologies are available in your very specific system that you might not be utilizing today. Sometimes just a firmware update will unlock a number of features that you didn't realize were available to you, or might not have been set up from the initial install. It's amazing how many times customers don't realize the capabilities that their systems can already do out of the box. And that goes into part of the planning as well, not just unification, but how do we make the system as useful as possible for you?
Okay, well, thank you. Our next question goes back more to like we were talking about the leaves and the trench coats. And this question is asking about, wondering about the rate of false positives on registering gunshots.
Yeah, so the gunshot itself, false alarm is actually very low. There's a number of different systems out there. One of the attractive components to the shooter detection system is they use a two-factor authentication for their notification devices, or not notification, but their sensors. So they're looking for the sound analytic of the gunshot as well as the muzzle flash. So there's a visual component to it as well. The purely audible ones are using either a force, right? There's a force that's exerted from the gun that the sensor can detect, almost like a sound wave, versus the sound itself being analyzed. And all of them have their own stats that we could look at, but it's high 90s percentile of accuracy. And you know, the example is a slamming locker, dropping books on a floor. We've pretty accurately shown that dropping books, slamming lockers is not causing these false alarms anymore. We've got pretty good at identifying exactly what gun was shot and what caliber bullet was in the gun, and then sending those alarms through. False alarms, though, do happen. They happen with analytics. It's the idea, though, is managing alarms in what we talked about today. If we get 9 positive out of 12 alarms, say, let's say 3 were false, your officers can very quickly, in most cases, identify it's not a false alarm, but they're using their time only responding to alarms that are coming in on the system, versus 100, 200, 300 cameras or more, thousands in a university type campus. It's impossible to manage everything and to look at everything, right? So what we're trying to do is provide actionable alarms that are accurate. And I, would never say it's 100%, because I don't think anyone can ever be 100%.
Okay. Yeah, we have a question I have for you is, we have a minor league baseball stadium here in my backyard, and every Friday and Saturday night, they shoot off fireworks. And of course, with everybody who has the system, as soon as they start going off, the next thing you know, everybody's reporting, did you hear gunshots? Did you hear gunshots? Do these systems know the difference between fireworks and gunshots, since the sound is almost the same?
Yeah, they do, because it might sound the same to us, but the algorithms are looking very specifically in detail at the sound waves and the sound pattern to identify, was that a gunshot or was it a firework? There's literally thousands of very specific sound properties that have been identified for every single thing that could make a noise, including a car backfiring. I happen to be on the Nextdoor app in my neighborhood, and I hear the same thing when fireworks go off. Was that a gunshot? And it's and occasionally it is gunshots because I live in an area in the country where people do go to the ranges, or if we have property you can shoot. And those could be false alarms for those closer campuses that have these sensors. I would say, again, what we want to do in this case, we would bring in the manufacturer and we would ask those very specific questions is, look, we're close to the village who sets off fireworks at 4th of July, at Memorial Day, after the parade, or, at the baseball game or football game after, the game or at the start of it. Even rock concerts coming in, right? They're going to have some sound that we want to make sure is not going to false alarm and create chaos, because once that false alarm goes through, it is chaotic. It will hit the news, and it's something that everybody strives for, is to stay out of the media. Sometimes no media is good media in this case. So we could bring in those manufacturers and test against those actual events and provide that information. But I have seen the reports and the studies, and every single manufacturer that provides event shot detection is looking at those analytics. Fireworks, car backfires, lockers and books, whatever could make that sound.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We have a few other questions that are more detailed for probably a little research for you. So I will tell the people who ask the questions, you will be hearing from either David or from someone at Siemens to answer your questions. So with that, David, thank you so much for a very informative webinar today. We truly appreciate it. And to our attendees, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. So until next time, be safe, stay healthy, and let's be kind to one another. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.